Sergeant Ava Rhodes, bloodied and bruised, found herself shoved into a dimly lit cell aboard a Draconis Alliance transport. Her captors, a mix of rugged Draconian soldiers and sleek, artificial intelligences, secured her restraints with a clinical detachment. She glared at them, her resolve as hardened as the titanium cuffs binding her wrists. "Comfortable, human?" sneered Commander Zorath, his scaly skin reflecting the cold light of the cell. Ava spat at his feet, her eyes burning with defiance. "I've been in worse places than this." Zorath chuckled, a guttural sound that filled the cramped space. "Not like the void, Sergeant. You will beg for those places before long." As the transport docked with the void, the infamous prison looming like a behemoth in the void of space, Ava's heart raced. She had heard stories, none of them good. The airlock hissed open, and she was thrust into the chaos of the prison's intake area, where a cacophony of alien languages and the stench of despair hung heavy. "You're now under the custody of the void. Compliance will be rewarded," announced a disembodied voice as Ava was processed. Scanning devices hummed around her, cataloging her every detail. She was then led through a series of barred checkpoints, her eyes catching glimpses of inmates of all species, each looking more dejected than the last. Finally, she was thrown into a solitary cell, the heavy door slamming shut with a resounding clang that echoed the finality of her situation. But as the guard's footsteps receded, a strange silence fell. Ava felt the air shift, a palpable change that tingled across her skin. Then, without warning, everything went black. Panic rose in her chest, but before she could scream, light flooded the area again. She was no longer in her cell but standing in what appeared to be an endless desert under a swirling violet sky, the quantum realm. Confusion reigned as she tried to grasp her surroundings. "What in the—" "You're not hallucinating, Sergeant." The voice came from behind her. Turning swiftly, Ava saw Marek, her trusted friend and comrade, although now something in his demeanor seemed off. "Marek? How did you— What is this place?" she demanded, her voice a mix of relief and suspicion. "It's the result of the Warden's experiments. We're not just prisoners, we're part of something bigger. Something dangerous," Marek explained, his eyes scanning the horizon nervously. Ava stepped closer, her mind racing to piece everything together. "And you? Are you a part of this?" "I didn't have a choice. They knew about my past, my family. I had to cooperate," Marek confessed, the guilt evident in his voice. Ava's heart sank. Betrayal stung her, but survival was paramount. "We need to get out of here, Marek. Whatever this is, it's not right. We don't belong here." Marek nodded, leading her toward what looked like a series of shimmering portals. Each of these leads to a different part of the quantum realm. The Warden controls them, manipulating everything here. As they approached a portal, a group of ethereal beings appeared, their forms flickering like flames. One of them, a being radiating a soft blue light, spoke. "You are not like the others, human. You do not belong here. We're trying to leave. Can you help us?" Ava asked, her voice a mix of hope and desperation. The beings conferred among themselves, then turned back to her. "We can assist you, but know this: the realm is unstable, and the Warden's grasp is strong. You must be quick." Marek and Ava exchanged a determined look before stepping through the portal, emerging into a different part of the quantum realm that resembled a floating city made of glass and light. "This place, it's incredible," Ava breathed, her awe momentarily distracting her from their perilous situation. "We aren't safe here," Marek reminded her, pulling her along. "We need to find the central control. It's the heart of the realm, where we can destabilize the Warden's control." As they navigated the translucent streets, they encountered various obstacles, quantum fluctuations that altered gravity, distorted time, and morphed the landscape unpredictably. Ava's training kept them moving forward, her leadership never wavering. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the core of the realm, a towering structure pulsating with energy. "This is it," Marek said, pointing to a panel brimming with alien symbols. "We can send a surge through this system, disrupt the quantum field enough to—" Before he could finish, A squadron of Draconis guards appeared, weapons drawn. "There's nowhere to run, humans!" the captain barked. Ava stepped forward, her stance firm. "We're not running. We're fighting. For every prisoner you've wronged, for every life you've ruined." What followed was a blur of combat, Ava and Marek working seamlessly together, their moves a testament to their training and their desperate hope for freedom. They managed to reach the panel, Marek quickly working the controls as Ava held off their attackers. With a final triumphant cry, Marek activated the device. A shockwave of energy rippled through the realm, the prison shaking to its core as reality began to stitch itself back together. They found themselves suddenly back in the void, the prison now materializing in a safe location near a Galactic Union base. The inmates were freed, the warden arrested, and the experiments exposed. Ava watched as Marek was taken away, his earlier betrayal not forgotten by the authorities. Their eyes met, a silent conversation of regret and understanding passing between them. "Sergeant Rhodes," a Union officer approached her. "You've done the impossible today." Ava looked around at the freed prisoners, her gaze resolute. "No one should have the power to tamper with reality. It's time we made sure of that." As the Union celebrated, Ava knew her fight was far from over. But for now, she had given hope to those who had none. The universe had not broken her, it had revealed her strength, and she would continue to stand against any force that dared to underestimate the will of humanity. Ava Rhodes stood still for a moment, her senses heightened by the abrupt shift in her surroundings. The prison, known as the Void, had vanished from physical space, and now she found herself in a shifting landscape that defied all natural laws. She was in the quantum realm, a place where thoughts could manipulate reality, and her fellow prisoners were just beginning to understand their predicament. Ava turned to Marek, whose face was shadowed with guilt. "This is where you've been all along?" she asked, her voice tinged with betrayal. "Yes," Marek replied, his eyes avoiding hers. "I was forced to help the warden with his experiments. They threatened my family, Ava. I had no choice." Ava's anger simmered, but she knew that they needed to work together if they were going to survive. "What's the plan now?" she asked, her tone softening slightly. "We need to find the source of the quantum instability. The warden is using it to build a weapon. We stop him, we might stop this whole nightmare," Marek explained. The pair navigated through the ever-changing landscape, dodging bizarre quantum anomalies that manifested as swirling vortexes and bizarre creatures conjured from the fears and memories of the imprisoned. Ava, relying on her training and instincts, led them through each challenge, while Marek provided insights into the workings of the quantum realm. As they moved, Ava listened to the whispers of the realm, learning to harness its power. She could feel the fabric of reality bending at her command, a surreal experience that both terrified and exhilarated her. They eventually reached a colossal structure that pulsed with a strange energy, the heart of the quantum instability. "This is it," Marek said, pointing to the towering edifice that seemed to distort the air around it. "How do we shut it down?" Ava asked, her gaze fixed on the building. "We overload the system. The energy feedback should collapse the quantum field, hopefully snapping us back to our original reality," Marek answered. The duo entered the structure, finding themselves in a labyrinth of glowing corridors that hummed with power. They encountered guards, remnants of the warden's loyal forces, who attacked relentlessly. Ava and Marek fought back with everything they had, their actions synchronizing perfectly despite the underlying tension between them. As they reached the core of the structure, Ava accessed the control panel. Her fingers flew over the alien symbols, intuitively understanding their function through her interaction with the quantum realm. "Almost there," she muttered, her concentration unbreakable. Marek stood guard, taking down any guards who managed to get close. "Hurry, Ava!" he shouted over the sound of gunfire. "Just a bit more," Ava replied, her voice steady. She finally hit the last sequence, and the core began to emit a high-pitched whine, signaling the onset of overload. "We need to get out now!" Marek grabbed Ava's arm, pulling her away as the building started to shake violently. They ran through the collapsing corridors, dodging debris and quantum distortions that threatened to swallow them whole. Just as they reached the exit, the core exploded behind them, sending a shockwave that propelled them forward into the void. Ava and Marek landed hard on the ground, disoriented but alive. They looked around, expecting to see the familiar walls of the void, but instead they found themselves back on the prison planet. The prison itself was still missing, a gaping hole in its place. "We did it," Ava breathed, a mix of relief and disbelief in her voice. "Not yet," Marek said, looking around warily. "We stopped the Warden's plan, but we still need to find a way off this planet. And we need to deal with the Warden himself." Ava nodded, her resolve hardening. "Let's go. We've come too far to give up now." Together, they set off across the barren landscape, determined to find a way to escape and bring justice to those who had wronged them. The sun set behind them, casting long shadows on the ground as they walked, a symbol of the dark times they had endured and the light of hope that still guided them forward. As they moved, Ava felt a change within herself. The quantum realm had shown her the limitless potential of reality, and she knew that she would never be the same. She had faced her fears, confronted betrayal, and come out stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to meet them head-on, with Marek by her side. The story of their escape would spread across the galaxies, a tale of resilience, courage, and the unyielding human spirit. And while the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: Ava Rhodes was no longer just a soldier. She was a leader, a survivor, and a beacon of hope for all who faced oppression. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that no prison could hold her, no enemy could defeat her, and no bond could be broken by betrayal. Ava and Marek trekked through the barren landscape of the prison planet, their shadows long in the dim light of the setting sun. Every step took them further from the chaos of the void's quantum instability, but closer to a confrontation with its orchestrator, the Warden. "Marek, when we find him, then what?" "We're still outgunned and outnumbered," Ava said, her voice low, mirroring the fatigue that clung to her bones. Marek's face was set, his eyes focused on the horizon. "We gather support. The Warden's not popular, he's feared. There's a difference. The other prisoners, they'll follow you now, Ava. They've seen what you can do." Ava nodded slowly. The power she had wielded in the quantum realm was unlike anything she had experienced, a raw force that resonated deeply within her, yet it frightened her too. "And if the Warden's got more tricks up his sleeve? We'll handle it together. Like always," Marek reassured her, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder. As they moved forward, the ground beneath their feet began to rumble, and a loud, mechanical whir cut through the silence of the dying day. They exchanged a look and quickened their pace, heading towards the source of the noise. It wasn't long before they saw it, a makeshift rally point, where a crowd of disheveled yet determined prisoners had gathered. The Warden was nowhere in sight, but his guards were, nervously clutching their weapons as they formed a barrier between the prisoners and a large, heavily fortified compound. Stepping into the clearing, Ava raised her hands, calling for silence. The murmurs died down as all eyes turned to her. "I know you're scared. I am too. But together, we have a chance to end this. To be free. I can't do it without you." Whispers rippled through the crowd, then a voice shouted, "Why should we follow you?" Ava met the speaker's gaze, her voice steady. "Because I've been where you are. I've felt powerless. But I've seen what we can do when we fight together. We broke out of a quantum prison that was supposed to be unbeatable. We can take down one man." Murmurs of agreement began to swell, and soon, the crowd was nodding, their faces hardening with resolve. "Then let's go," Ava declared, turning towards the compound. The prisoners rallied behind her, their steps growing louder as they approached the guards. The guards shifted uncomfortably, eyeing the approaching crowd warily. As Ava drew closer, she could see the fear in their eyes, fear of her, fear of the crowd, fear of the unknown. "We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want the Warden," Ava called out to them. "Stand down, and you're free to go." After a tense moment, the guards looked at one another, then, lowering their weapons, they stepped aside, melting away into the twilight. The crowd surged forward, sweeping Ava and Marek along with them towards the compound's main gate. The gate crashed open, and the prisoners poured inside, spreading out and searching for the warden. Ava, with Marek at her side, headed straight for the control room. They burst through the door, finding the warden hunched over a bank of monitors, his back to them. "Warden!" Ava's voice was like a whip crack. He spun around, his expression one of surprise that quickly morphed into sneering contempt. "Ava Rhodes, the prodigal prisoner. To what do I owe the pleasure?" he drawled, his eyes flicking to a button on the console. "End this, now. Release the prisoners, shut down the experiments, or we end you," Ava demanded, her voice cold and hard. The warden laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You think you've won? This is bigger than you, bigger than me. The experiments will continue, with or without me." Ava glanced at Marek, who nodded slightly. She turned back to the warden, stepping closer. "Then you leave me no choice." As she spoke, she lunged forward, her hand slamming down on the console, hitting the button before the warden could. Alarms blared, and the monitors flickered, showing cell doors sliding open and systems shutting down across the complex. The warden's face strained of color. "What have you done?" "Freed them. Ended your reign of terror," Ava said, her gaze not leaving his face. Marek grabbed the warden, securing his hands behind his back. "It's over." Ava turned to leave, pausing at the door. "This facility can be something else, something good. A place of healing, maybe, or a new start for those who want it. But it will never be a prison again." As they walked out, leaving the warden for the prisoners to deal with, the compound was filled with cheers and shouts of freedom. Ava felt a weight lift from her shoulders, her mission complete, yet she knew this was just the beginning of a longer journey. Outside, under the stars, Marek looked at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "What now, Ava?" Ava looked out at the freed prisoners, her heart full. "Now we help rebuild. And then? We find a way back home. Together." The night air was cool, and the stars shone brightly above, a tapestry of light against the dark sky. They had won, for now, but tomorrow was a new day, with new challenges. But whatever came, they would face it together, as free people in a free world. Ava stood at the heart of the liberated compound, the distant sounds of celebration mixing with the hum of cooling systems shutting down. The prisoners had dispersed into groups, some reveling in their newfound freedom, others already discussing the logistics of survival in a hostile galaxy. Despite the victory, a nagging sense of unfinished business tugged at Ava's thoughts. The warden's final words echoed in her mind, chilling her resolve. "This is bigger than you, bigger than me." Marek approached, his face worn but his posture steady. "The warden's secure. The others have him locked up in one of the holding cells." "What now, Ava?" She looked at him, her brow furrowed. "He said the experiments would continue. He wasn't bluffing, Marek. There's more to this than we're seeing." Marek hesitated before replying, his tone careful. "We've done enough here. The prisoners are free, the compound is ours. Maybe it's time to let the Union handle the rest." Ava shook her head, her voice firm. "You know that's not how this works. If there's another facility, another project like this one, how many more lives will be destroyed before anyone intervenes?" Marek sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "And you think he's just going to tell us where it is?" Ava's lips curved into a grim smile. "He doesn't have to. We make him show us." Minutes later, Ava and Marek stood in front of the holding cell. The warden sat inside, his confidence frayed but not entirely broken. He smirked when he saw them. "Come to gloat, Rhodes?" "No," Ava replied coldly. "We're here to finish this." The warden chuckled, shaking his head. "You think you've won. You're as naive as you are stubborn." Ava stepped closer, her voice low but intense. "You're going to tell us where the other facilities are. Or what? You'll kill me? Go ahead. It won't stop anything," he said, leaning back with an air of defiance. Ava didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, flickering device. "Recognize this?" It's a quantum stabilizer. I've modified it to link directly to the facility's remaining systems. You tell us what we need to know, and I won't use it. The warden's confidence faltered for the first time. You wouldn't dare. Ava tilted her head slightly, her gaze piercing. Try me. The room fell silent, the tension thick as the warden weighed his options. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. There's a secondary site. Not far from here. A planet called Vanda 7. But you won't make it there alive. The defenses are automated, and the overseers don't take kindly to visitors. Ava turned to Marek, who nodded. That's all we needed. As they left the cell, Ava's mind raced with the implications. Vanda 7 wasn't just another target. It was a hub of the warden's operations, the true heart of his experiments. Whatever horrors awaited them there, she knew they couldn't stop now. Preparations began immediately. Ava rallied a group of volunteers, prisoners who were eager to strike back at the system that had imprisoned them. Marek worked on securing a transport, salvaging parts from the compound's hangar. The mood was tense but determined. As they prepared to depart, Marek approached Ava, his voice tinged with concern. You're sure about this? We're walking into the unknown. Ava met his gaze, her expression resolute. We've come too far to stop now. If Vanda 7 is the source, then that's where we end this. The journey to Vanda 7 was fraught with uncertainty. The transport shuddered under the strain of its patch systems, and the volunteers were a mix of seasoned fighters and desperate survivors. Despite the odds, Ava's leadership held them together, her calm presence a beacon of hope in the face of impending danger. As the barren, ice-covered landscape of Vanda 7 came into view, Ava's grip on the controls tightened. The facility was massive, its sleek design and glowing defenses a stark contrast to the desolation around it. Alarms blared as the transport breached the outer perimeter, automated turrets springing to life. Brace yourselves! Ava shouted, her hands steady as she maneuvered the ship through a hail of laser fire. Marek manned the weapons, returning fire with precision. We're not going to last long out here. Then we make it quick, Ava replied, her voice steady. Get us close enough to land. We'll handle the rest on foot. The transport skidded to a halt just outside the facility, smoke billowing from its damaged hull. Ava and her team disembarked, weapons drawn. The cold bit at their exposed skin, but they pressed on, driven by determination. Inside the facility, the resistance was fierce. Drones and automated sentries descended upon them, their sleek forms cutting through the air with lethal precision. Ava led the charge, her movements calculated and precise. Her team followed her lead, their makeshift weapons proving more effective than expected. As they pushed deeper into the facility, the scale of the experiments became horrifyingly clear. Rows of containment units lined the walls, each housing beings from across the galaxy, their forms twisted and unrecognizable. The sight fueled Ava's resolve. Finally, they reached the central control room. The overseers, a cadre of augmented beings, stood waiting. Their leader, a tall figure with a mechanical arm, regarded Ava with cold detachment. You should have stayed away. Ava raised her weapon, her voice unwavering. You should have known better than to underestimate us. The fight that followed was brutal. The overseers were highly skilled, their augmentations giving them an edge, but Ava's team fought with a ferocity born of desperation. One by one, the overseers fell, until only their leader remained. Ava faced him, her weapon trained on his chest. It's over. He smirked, blood trickling from his lip. You don't even know what you've done. The warden was just the beginning. Before Ava could respond, he activated a device on his wrist. The facility began to shake, the hum of power rising to a deafening pitch. Self-destruct, Marek shouted, his eyes wide. We have to go. Ava hesitated for a split second, then grabbed the device from the overseer's wrist. Not yet. She raced to the control panel, her hands flying over the keys. The seconds stretched into eternity as she worked, the ground trembling beneath her feet. Come on, Ava! Marek yelled, his voice barely audible over the chaos. With a final keystroke, the power levels stabilized, the tremors subsiding. Ava turned to her team, her chest heaving. It's done! The facility was secured, its secrets laid bare. As the team regrouped, the weight of their actions settled on them. They had struck a decisive blow, but the fight was far from over. Ava looked at Marek, a faint smile playing on her lips. This time, we make sure it ends. And with that, they prepared to face whatever came next, their bond stronger and their purpose clearer than ever before. The command center was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of dormant machinery and the distant echoes of the wounded facility settling after the battle. Ava stood at the heart of the room, her fingers tracing the edges of the device she had torn from the overseer's wrist. It glowed faintly, a small but menacing reminder of what they had just survived. Around her, the remnants of her team gathered, their faces marked with exhaustion and determination. Marek leaned against the console, wiping blood from his brow. We've won a battle, but this war's far from over. What now, Ava? Ava didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the rows of monitors, each displaying a different part of the facility. Containment pods filled with sentient beings of all shapes and sizes filled the screens, their occupants in various states of consciousness. Some were humanoid, others utterly alien, but all were victims of the experiments the warden had overseen. Ava exhaled slowly, her voice steady but strained. We free them. Marek stepped closer, his brow furrowed. Free them? Ava, half of them might not even survive outside these pods. We don't know what kind of condition they're in. We don't leave anyone behind, she replied firmly, turning to face him. They've been trapped, tortured, and turned into tools. Just like us. We owe them more than a clean escape. He nodded reluctantly. Then we'd better work fast. No telling how long this place will stay stable. Ava divided the team into smaller groups, assigning them to different sectors of the facility. Each group was tasked with locating the containment controls, dismantling the security systems, and preparing the pods for evacuation. As the others dispersed, Ava and Marek remained in the command center, poring over the overseer's console. The data on the screen painted a grim picture, blueprints for similar facilities scattered across the galaxy, their locations marked in a coded language. Marek let out a low whistle as he scrolled through the files. This isn't just an operation. It's a network. Ava's jaw tightened. A network we're going to dismantle, one piece at a time. But first, we finish here. As they worked, the overhead lights flickered, casting the room into brief moments of darkness. The facility was dying, its systems failing under the strain of the damage they had inflicted. Ava keyed into the intercom, her voice sharp but calm. Everyone report. What's the status of the pods? One by one, voices crackled through the comms. Sector B is clear, pods are prepped for release. Sector D is secure, but we're running into power issues. Sector F, it's bad. Some of these systems are fried. We need help. Ava turned to Marek, her expression grim. You stay here and keep the facility stable. I'll take Sector F. He grabbed her arm as she turned to leave. You can't do everything, Ava. Let someone else handle it. She met his gaze, her voice unwavering. If it's fried, it'll need manual overrides. I know the systems better than anyone. Just keep the lights on until I get back. Before he could argue further, she was gone, her steps quick and purposeful as she navigated the maze-like corridors. The air grew colder as she approached Sector F, the hum of machinery replaced by an eerie silence. When she entered, the sight stopped her in her tracks. Dozens of pods lined the walls, their inhabitants barely visible through the frosted glass. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the main control panel was a mess of melted circuits and shattered screens. Ava approached the nearest pod, her hands moving instinctively to access the manual release. She muttered under her breath, "Let's hope you're still functional." The pod hissed as it began to open, releasing a thin cloud of vapor. The being inside was humanoid, its features delicate but foreign, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its eyes fluttered open, locking onto Ava with a mix of fear and confusion. "You're safe," Ava said softly, helping the being out of the pod. Can you walk? It nodded shakily, its voice barely a whisper. Others, help the others. Ava didn't hesitate, moving to the next pod and then the next, repeating the process with practiced efficiency. Each time, she reassured the occupant, guiding them to the safest part of the room. Her hands were blistered from the heat of the malfunctioning controls, but she didn't stop. By the time Marek's voice crackled through her calm, her muscles burned with exhaustion. Ava, the facility's systems are crashing faster than I can stabilize them. We've got minutes, maybe less. She looked around at the beings she had freed, their fragile forms huddled together. Her voice was calm but firm. We're almost done. Get the transport ready for evac. The last pod opened with a screech, its occupant collapsing into her arms. Ava gritted her teeth, carrying the being towards the exit as the room shuddered violently. When she reached the corridor, she was met by 2 members of her team, their faces pale but determined. We've got them, one said, taking the being from Ava's arms. You go. Ava nodded, turning and sprinting back towards the command center. The hallways were chaotic, prisoners and volunteers alike rushing towards the transport. As she reached the command center, Marek was waiting for her, his face lit by the flickering monitors. You cut it close, he said, his tone light despite the tension. Just another day, she replied, grabbing his arm. Let's move. The 2 of them joined the crowd at the transport, helping the freed beings onto the ship as the facility groaned and shuddered around them. When the last of the evacuees was aboard, Ava and Marek climbed into the cockpit, the door sealing behind them with a hiss. Punch it, Ava said, her voice tight. Marek didn't need to be told twice. The transport roared to life, blasting away from the crumbling facility. As they ascended, the building below collapsed in on itself, disappearing into a cloud of smoke and debris. Silence filled the cabin as the crew watched the destruction fade behind them. Ava finally leaned back in her seat, her body heavy with exhaustion. We did it. Marek glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. For now. Vander 7 is gone, but there's still the network. Ava nodded, her gaze fixed on the stars outside the window. One fight at a time. The cabin settled into quiet murmurs as the freed beings and volunteers tended to each other, their hope rekindled. Ava allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, knowing that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But for now, they had won. And that was enough.